Ernest Oppenheimer.
Yes. And the first place he quadruples the value of the money that was in Cecil John Rhodes' fund was when he goes to Namibia and discovers the kimberlite or diamonds that get carried from Lesotho through the Orange River all the way down to the coast of Namibia, where those diamonds are dumped into the sea. Anglo-America discovered that. And they discovered the cleanest, clearest diamonds ever in Namibia that just used to be picked up off the beach that were coming from Lesotho. And that's what they used to start making huge money that was then invested into many industries. Now, when you start understanding the web of industries,
Sure.
the Oppenheimers became the biggest producers of gold, the biggest producers of diamonds. So they created the biggest company to control diamonds, De Beers. They created the laws to control diamonds all across the world.
Sure.
They created the central, it's called CSO, the Central Selling Organization, to sell the diamonds. Because diamonds were not in short supply. Diamonds are actually a non-precious stone found all over the world. So Cecil John Rhodes and the Oppenheimers specialized in controlling the supply, closing up wherever there's a diamond mine so that it doesn't go onto the market, and then they can then control the supply and therefore the price.
This is still in effect today?
Yes.
Because a lot of people don't know that De Beers literally, it's almost like what happens in any country in South Africa. Anything you find under the ground belongs to government. You cannot discover diamonds.
No.
They almost have a monopoly on all that. They have to go through them. They need to verify.
And that's why they created the Kimberley process. If you do not go through the Kimberley process, if your diamonds are not sold
around the world,
because what they're trying to do is to control the diamonds. And that's why you saw they started criminalizing people like Vive from Israel, people like Dan Getlan, because they were
Dan Gertler from the DRC.
Yes.
The capture of the DRC and the Kabila family.
But now this is where it gets interesting. With gold and platinum, they decided then to create something different. Number one, they created the refineries that refine gold and diamonds. So Oppenheimers began to own what is called Jason Matthey.
Okay.
Jason Matthey is a British company that does smelting of gold, silver, and platinum. So they got shares in Jason Matthey. In America, they used to have another American company owned by a German Jew as well called Engelhardt. They started controlling Engelhardt that does smelting of gold and platinum and silver in America. These are the two biggest companies that refine and purify gold, platinum, and silver. They were now under the control of the Oppenheimers.
Sure.
So you would mine gold in South Africa. It would not be purified or refined by anyone else but these two companies. So that way, even if you're not part and parcel of the Oppenheimer conglomerate, you still have to sell your gold. You still have to send your gold through their refineries. BASF in Germany also has a refinery. Right. Then the next thing they did is they created the London bullion market.
That's gold.
I mean, it was London, the London bullion market.
For gold.
Yeah. What that does, it's not only gold and platinum.
Okay. I didn't know
and
that.
Other precious metals, silver.
Okay.
What they do is they sit as a cartel of Western banks. This cartel then decides to do what is called market price fixing. They determine the price of gold, they determine the price of platinum, they determine the price of silver every day. And they tell you. And then that gold, when it comes, guess who buys it? The Rothschilds buy the majority of it, the platinum, and then sell it to the rest of the market. So they determine the price. They fix the price. That's not market economics. That is not a free market economic system. That is a monopolistic system. It's a price-fixing system, and we've got the Competition Commission in South Africa to stop that from happening.
I've got two quick ones. The first one
so
is...
let me leave you where we can understand. So they began to control the marketing of that gold. So they control the refining, they control the marketing. And then they began to buy a company that was called it's It's a commodity trading company that is in America. The
Not Philip
biggest
Morris.
control.
Okay.
That it's called Philip. I'm just forgetting the name.
Sure.
No. So they buy this commodity broking company. It's the biggest commodity broking company in the world, even bigger
Philip
than
Brothers.
Glencore. Huh?
Not Philip Brothers?
Phil Brothers.
Brothers.
Phil. It was.
I know
it was
something,
Phillips-
Rutendo. I know something.
It was
Give me a little
Phillips
bit of
and
credit.
Solomon's. There was first of all Solomon Brothers,
Sure.
and then there was Phillips, and then they came together. But you know your stuff.
A little bit.
Yeah. So now they're controlling commodity broking. So you produce a commodity, they buy it.
Yeah.
When you now want to refine it, they refine it. And when you now want to market it, they give you the price. So they controlled global commodity broking, mining, and selling. And with that, South African miners have no option. Platinum miners, diamond miners, gold miners. You have nowhere else to sell your product
But these
than
guys.
through them. You've got nowhere else to refine your product than through them. Because then and so now every single refinery in the world has to be associated with the London bullion market. So now this is why you hear Rwanda now has a smelter. That smelter is now associated and linked with the London bullion market. So it can now refine and its gold is accepted by the London bullion market. Zimbabwe had what is called fidelity printers. Fidelity printers had accreditation with the London bullion market. The moment we went under sanctions, we then reduced the production of gold because you have to produce, I think, over 10 tons of gold every single year. So they lost their license. But it's not only you losing, so it's against sanctions being used to make you lose credibility, make you lose your position to refine your gold and give it to the rest of the world. So till today, Anglo-America controls the production of gold, the marketing of gold, the marketing of platinum, marketing of gold, silver, and other precious metals through other exchanges, particularly in Singapore. Right now, if you want to sell coal, so there's a time I wanted to get in the coal business. There's no coal owned by the South African government. So you have to apply to mining companies for coal. The biggest coal miner in this country remains Anglo-America, followed by Exxaro and Rio Tinto and Glencore, and then Sasol.
Where does BHP is? BHP somewhere there?
Yeah, BHP is there as well.
Okay.
Because you've got 7 major mining companies that mine the bulk of South Africa's coal and provide Eskom and the South African market with almost 89% of its coal.
Can we pause there? The Oppenheimers were German.
German.
Okay, that's the first thing.
The Rothschilds were German.
You said German Jewish. You know, when you mentioned, or when we came across the Philip brothers, how I know about them is Mark Rich, because he used to work for Philip Brothers, and he was a German Jewish guy. He was Mark Reich, and then they didn't like that name when they got to America, so he changed to Rich.
Oh yes,
They gave birth to Glencore.
Herzog is no, but weren't they Russians? They were Jews
I
from
believe
Russia.
they were German Jews.
German Russians. Check it out.
You're saying they're Russian?
Yes.
Okay. But anyways,
German Russians, but it's same thing.
I know he was Jewish, but anyways, so I wanted to mention that there was another question, but it slipped me now. It's fine.
But
Please
can you
continue
see-
with the coal. 89% from 7 companies.
From 7
Of
companies.
which Glencore is a breakaway from Mark Rich and Company. And Mark Rich was groomed at Philip Brothers, which, as you rightly said, were the biggest commodity trading company at that time. And then Mark Rich came and became a cowboy, and he gave birth to other cowboys. We've got your Ivan Klassenbergs now.
And he was arrested, Mark Rich. He was arrested for corruption. He was arrested for
He ran away from America and he never went back. He was wanted till he passed away, wealthy in Switzerland, where he was safe.
But now, with what you're saying, you've just confirmed to me that Glencore is a creation of Phil Brothers. And if Glencore is a creation of Phil Brothers, Glencore is Anglo-America. If you look at you've just made a link that is interesting to talk about how big this Anglo-American capital is and its control of not only South Africa, but, the globe. You have just been able to make a link between Phil Brothers, and they now call it Phil Bro, and the creation of Glencore.
Yeah.
And if you look, these are the biggest mining companies in South Africa. And so Oppenheimer money can be seen and Oppenheimer influence can be seen in the control of the production of gold in South Africa, the commodity broking, and the production of any resource here, because Glencore is there, Anglo America is there, and even their offshoots. Some people say there's links with implants. Now, this is what Kwame Nkrumah called a combine. He said that all these businesses that were created by Jewish capital, Rothschild money at the end, at the beginning, and came to exploit Africa, South America, and Asia. If you look at them, they are one and the same people that have cross shareholding. They pick the directors. The directors are in one company and many others. It's called a combine.
I wonder if there's a link. My mate, Rob Hersoff, shout out to Rob. His grandfather, I think Basil Hersoff and Slip Manel, they founded Anglo-Fall.
Yes.
And you know, when I first heard of Anglo-Fall, which has been broken down into AVI, Anglo-Fall Industries, Avenge, Anglo-Fall Engineering, and then I think there was the mining part, of which some of it ended up with Patrice Motsepe, I think in African Rainbow Minerals. The Anglo part, which you were trying to break down. And I think when you look at the history, I think the family up Basil and before them, I think Jewish as well.
Yes.
And I think you may have said before that Russian Jewish, not German Jewish.
That's
and I wonder if there's a link with the Anglo-American and Anglo-Fall.
Heads of parents. I can't make the link because I haven't read up on that enough.
Sure.
But that Anglo says something.
Sure.
And this just brings me up to Rob. A lot of people think Rob is just another white guy with money. He is exactly at the level of the Oppenheimers and the the Cecil John Rhodeses of this world. They are at the pinnacle of being facilitators of imperialism on behalf of this Jewish capital.
Imperialism.
Oh yeah.
I have to defend Rob. So one of the things I appreciate about Rob is that he owns he hates this term, his privilege. He says, I was very blessed, very lucky. My parents afforded me a great education, etc. And the other thing he acknowledges to what you're saying is his grandfather did really, really well in terms of what they built with Anglo-Fall and what it's been broken down into today.
And I've got no issue. The thing is, like I said, we're not the first people to be asking questions about the Jews.
Sure.
Even people like Henry Ford asked these questions. It's called the Jewish question.
Sure.
But what the Jews never want to admit is that they have used exploitation, primitive accumulation, from the time that they started this thing in the French Revolution to start capitalism. It was based on utilizing force, utilizing genocide to kill people in order to control the resources. And it's not the Jews that did it. They used other people to do it.
You're going to get cancelled like Kanye.
I don't have much to lose if I get cancelled. But the facts need to be said because they're already written in books that are written by people who are much more powerful than me,
sure.
Like Henry Ford, who wanted to understand.
This is not your opinion. It's stuff that's written down in history.
It's fact. That Jewish capital has always been able to control nations that went and brought imperialism and slavery. They owned the ships that carried the slaves. They owned the insurance houses that used to insure the slaves. They owned the banks that used to give people loans on slaves.
Yeah.
So slaves were property.
I can believe that.
You see what I'm saying? And I don't think there's any Jewish person that can prove me wrong in that aspect, that the banking system that they created was founded off colonialism, slavery, primitive accumulation, and the discovery law that we spoke about before.
When you speak about...
And my issue with Rob is that he doesn't want to admit that. He makes it sound like they became rich just from genius. No, there was exploitation there. There was murder. There was genocide. There was what was done to the Jews by the Nazis being done by the Jews and the powers that they funded on Africans.
You're gonna get our channel cancelled, Wena.
It shouldn't be cancelled. What we should have is a discussion where we say,
there are certain people that don't want us to have such discussions.
How do the Jews help to correct what they did to Africa or what they caused to happen to Africa in the same way that they've had correction with what it is that the Nazis did to them?
I've got a question But before I ask the question, I want to say this. And I've had to learn over time that when you have friends, you kind of have to try and protect and defend them.
Yeah.
Even when your friends are wrong. I need to say that categorically.
Yeah.
So if I'm Cyril, if I'm Nelson Mandela and I'm friends with Oppenheimer, with the Rupert, I almost have to protect them because maybe they affect my livelihood, our children play together, etc. This is not about Rob. And look, Rob is legacy of things that have happened. I find this similar to what you're saying because yes, someone like him would not want to have some of those discussions. In the same way, there are certain black families whose ancestors amassed a lot of money, fortune from taxi wars, currently now maybe tender wars, political wars, and today you're third, fourth generation going to Hilton, Michael House, Bishops, St. Stithian, St. John's, and it's like, but you realize your great-grandfather was, it's like, hey, Baba, and it's like, you would like them to acknowledge that, and for many reasons, family reasons, they can't. So I think I'm starting to understand why, because you're saying your family, and I'm thinking, this is a mate, therefore. The question I wanted to ask, when you spoke about the slave ships and the Jewish link, Dutch East India Company first came to mind. Do you believe there was any link between, let's say, Jewish capital and the Dutch companies in terms of global economy?
Oh, yes, absolutely. The Dutch were the richest country on earth outside the Chinese and the Indians during the Enlightenment era. And when shipping started going all across the world, they were the biggest traders. Now, of course, from Western history, it said that the Dutch were the richest. The truth of the matter is the Chinese were the richest, and they were followed by the Indians. And then when you come to the European territory, it was the Dutch. Netherlands was rich.
That's why they had to travel all the way. You weren't seeing Chinese and Indian people traveling to Europe. Come to us. We have the wealth.
And we are the greatest civilization. The world revolves around us. That was the thinking of the Chinese, which is why when people say the Chinese want to colonize the world, that's not their style. Yeah. Their style is they believe that they are an epitome of civilization and you must come to them and revolve around them. Oof. So they trade with you and they trade you into submission. That's it.
Can I say something quickly?
Yeah.
Before you carry on. Some of my mentors are very wealthy and black, white, etc. And one of the things that's fascinated me is they generally stay at home or in their company, and everyone, a president, a minister,
goes to them.
You come to me, and it's that king mindset.
Yeah,
you won't hear of a king going to see people come to the king.
That's right.
And I've tried to think in my head that if I ever want to be powerful, influential, I need to get into the habit of, if you need something from me, come to me. And I guess that was the Chinese idea of, we're not going to go there. We are, as you're saying, the epitome of civilization. You come to us. That's beautiful.
And you raised an important point where you say sometimes you've got to protect your friends or you've got to protect people who you have an interest with.
Yeah.
So my only reason why I would bring up some of the things I'm bringing now is that people like her, like Bob, are on the forefront right now of campaigning for the DA.
Sure.
And he has said that he has decided to come back to reinvest in South Africa because he believes in the potential of South Africa. But more critically, there's something that he said that many people didn't listen to. He believes in South Africa because he believes that they're going to boot out the ANC and they're going to have a coalition. And what he doesn't say is that that coalition is going to be led by the DA.
Okay.
So where I would need to get clarity from people like Bob is that, Bob, Rob, if you're going to have the DA come back and people like you are behind the DA, have you atoned for this past and the filth that we're talking about, which we don't want to associate with you per se, but it's part and parcel of what it is that made you? Can we trust you and a DA that comes with you and other Jews who funded the same DA under the NP government, which gave us apartheid to make people like yourselves profitable? So that's the question that we would want to ask.
But it's a fair question. It's one of the things myself, him, many other white people, many other white DA members, we debate aggressively so, because we argue, Pen, what do you mean? I'm like, this is not about me. My voice, my vote doesn't mean fuck all. I'm saying if you're claiming that you want black voters, you want them to understand the Democratic Alliance is great at governing are you willing to discuss social welfare? Are you willing to discuss land? Are you willing to discuss exactly what you're saying?
And
atonement and apology. And I've heard them say things like, but we've apologized. And I'm like, fuck that. You're lying, number one. Number two, even if you have, it's never been sincere. And I remember one Afrikaans gentleman saying, but what are we apologizing for? It wasn't us, it was the apartheid government. I'm like, this is the problem. And this is what looks like arrogance. Because if the ANC is corrupt and let's say I'm a child of whatever ANC leader. And then it's like, but you realize your father, grandfather, they ran this country to the ground. What do you have to, hey, it's not me. You're like, but you realize you're living in privilege because of fucking
that legacy.
And as long as specifically white people in those spaces don't want to have those conversations and they want to, but look at the ANC. I'm like, this is why you're never going to get votes. And that's why even today, and I've said this to Rob himself, I don't believe in the DA. I'm angry with the ANC. We can together stand and say #Futsak ANC, but you're not going to see me campaigning for the DA or any of these supposed other white leaders because I'm like a clever black. I'm a better black. I understand white people, but if you can't even convince me, you don't have any idea. And I'm trying to give you a little window into the mindset of a black person in an RDP in a shack somewhere. You can say fuck the ANC and load shedding, but in their heads, that versus you're not even willing to try understand. Come live with us. Come, they're never gonna hear you. So I fully hear what you're saying.
Not only that, we also have white people who are not able to introspect common sense. So the apartheid system failed.
Sure.
And it failed because it took resources of 100% of the people. It taxed 100% of the people. It took the labor of 100% of the people. And then it gave services to only 10%.
And that's capitalism, boy.
It's capitalism, but it's also mismanagement.
It is mismanagement.
That's how they were removed from power, by force.
Yeah.
When you see your own people uprising against you to remove you because you're such a bad leader, and the leadership, the bad leadership that you give is actually labeled a crime against humanity, you must know that your failure is monumental.
Sure.
What the ANC is doing will never be considered a crime against humanity. The misgovernance that they supposedly say the ANC is doing is not ever going to be called a crime against humanity. And what it is that the ANC is failing to do is a legacy of what it is that these whites did. So for instance, you look at the ESCOM situation. They created an electricity system that was created specifically to give electricity to the capitalists and the white corporates so that they can mine better, they can industrialize and produce better, and they can make money. Then they decided to give their proxies or their caretakers and their gatekeepers, the white population, the very same electricity. But this money that was used to create this was from the exploitation of the resources of this country called South Africa that they didn't own. So they're stolen resources from black South Africans. They used that to build ESCOM. They also used the labor of these black people. They also didn't pay these people adequate salaries. These people were paid 10% of what they're supposed to be paid, and the other 90% would be used to subsidize whites so that they can have more money.
Sure.
But the whites were still paying the cheapest electricity in the world, which means they were not paying a fair value for that electricity, and they were not paying for replacement cost of this electricity. And that's why ESCOM is where it is because the depreciation, the money to make sure that this ESCOM can be maintained and this ESCOM can be replaced and its machines can be replaced wasn't paid by white South Africans. So they were freeloading of this social welfare system of apartheid that allowed them to have cheap electricity, allowed them to have cheap maids, allowed them to have job preservation, and allowed them to have more salaries and higher salaries than they should have deserved at the expense of black people. And now that black people have to be put on that grid of the same electricity they built, the same electricity built by their stolen resources, they are now being told that they should pay for that electricity, yet they've been paying for the past 60 years since the establishment of ESCOM. They've been paying with their blood, they've been paying with their labor, they've been paying with their low salaries. The reason you've got black tax today, you have to look after your grandmother, grandfather, you have to look after those relatives of yours that are sick from lung diseases caused by working in mines, is because the money that was supposed to be paid your grandfather, the pension that was supposed to be paid your grandfather, has been taken and put into the pockets of all white South Africans who are sitting with unjust enrichment that came from a period of exploitation. And then they want to blame ESCOM's failures on the ANC. ANC should have a large kitty, huge savings, like the 380 billion I'm saying is sitting in white corporations. And I'm not even talking about what they've externalized. The ANC should have a kitty like that for all the parastatals if white South Africans had been paying the full value and full fee for what it is that they were using as services, and if the services were going to make them pay replacement cost for those things. They didn't.
Politics is emotional. Back to the Dutch, and you were speaking about China.
Yeah.
And I was asking if there's a link between what you were saying was Jewish global capital and industry, and any link to the Dutch or the Afrikaners maybe
Very
here.
good.
And I think maybe for this episode, we'll probably end just before the Afrikaners take over from the British in the South African economy, and then we'll carry on with the next chat.
Right. So it's like I was saying that the Dutch were very innovative people. And maybe, and when you read people like Lothrop Stadet's book, he says that they were Nordics, Aryans, the superior white race. Yeah. That's why they've got so much creativity. That's why they're so inventive. That's why they're so productive. So they were inventors. They produced things like the ship campus. They produced things like ships, high quality ships. They produced things like the sail. They produced the accounting system, the banking system, the first stock exchanges in the world. And that's how they got connected with the Jews.
I'm trying to figure out, is the Netherlands any close to Egypt and those areas?
No, it's actually...
Because some people would argue that these are African inventions. Accounting, you mentioned accounting and other things.
Right.
Sorry, I didn't want to deviate.
And I like what you bring up, but I don't want us to be caught up in the old system that was led by Africa. I want us to talk about the new era that comes after the Enlightenment of the European.
Yeah. Understandable.
So within this new era of the Enlightenment of the European, where they start dominating the world, soon after we get out of the, the Crusades. From the Crusades, we get into the Enlightenment, the creation of the printing press, and so forth and so on. The Dutch...
Gutenberg.
Yes.
Fuck, I'm so smart.
And people don't understand that these were the markers for the development of Western civilization that has been prevailing for the past 700 years. But within so doing, it's also destroying the world faster than any other era before.
Sure.
So this is where the Dutch and their creativity, their ability to produce and innovate technologies that became cutting edge. The ship became cutting edge. The campus became cutting edge. The sails of the ships became cutting edge. Their ability to turn ship's wool that was coming from places like Spain and places like England and sophisticating them into sails for ships made them very wealthy. And this is where they say that Spain used to be a very rich country. Portugal used to be very rich countries. They used to extract a lot of wealth from South America, but they lost all that wealth because when they came back to Europe with all their gold and all their silver, they had to spend it in the Netherlands, buying ships, buying campuses, buying sails. And the Netherlands then began to sell what it sophisticated from what they were producing, the sheepskin, the sheep wool that they were producing, they would make it, they will produce it into value that is 10 times, 100 times more. And that's how they got wealth from Spain and Portugal. The British were falling in the same trap. They were having to buy cloth. They were having to produce products. And then Henry came up with the Tudor plan and said, whoa, we actually becoming a third world country in Europe, or the Netherlands, Florence and France are progressing.
Florence is Italy.
Yes.
Okay.
The only reason he knew that is that he was raised by his auntie, which is that link against Saxe-Coburgs and royal families linked in Europe. He was raised in France. And when he saw what the French were doing, making cloth, making silk, he realized the importance of England catching up. So when he became president, he came up with a plan called the Tudor plan. He said, we will not sell our wool anymore to the Dutch or to the French. We're going to ask Dutch companies if they want our wool to come and produce the wool in our country.
Hey, Zimbabwe is saying, come have your lithium companies here.
That's why you have to read history.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
My brother once said...
Because what you're trying to get is what they call the triple rent.
Sure.
The triple rent comes in controlling the resource, manufacturing the resource or processing the resource into a finished manufactured good, and then controlling the market. And guess what we said about the Oppenheimers? We were able to show that they earned the triple rent. They control the gold under the ground.
Yes.
Then they process the gold through Jason Mathy or Engelhart Industries in America or BASF. Then they take it to market, which they control, to the London bullion market.
My brother says history is a blueprint for life. It's a blueprint? Not blueprint. What? A memorandum. When you're writing an exam.
That's right.
If you go and study history, you've already got all the answers. When you hear a politician, you're like, oh, I've seen this exam paper.
As a strategist, you always say research is the most important thing for you to create a strategy. So creating the strategy, positioning, and everything else is only 20%. Your research forms about 80%.
Sure.
And people don't understand that research is a history. And Africans hate history. We've taken it out of the curriculum. But yet it's 80% of a strategy. So then it's 80% of what it is that builds a person's ability to innovate.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And this is what we are losing out, and we need not lose out on this. Because everything we're talking about here, we keep giving examples of people who learned from history, implemented history, and they were able to do. And we have also proved that by our ANC government and ZANU-PF governments not using history, ZANU-PF didn't look at Kwame Nkrumah and how they sabotaged Kwame Nkrumah, how they sabotaged his Volta project, and how they eventually got him removed from power because they didn't study Kwame Nkrumah.
Sure.
The ANC has not studied ZANU-PF
to
understand what did they do when you reconciled with the whites, what happened.
Sure.
We haven't studied how the Dutch made it, how the Dutch and the Jews became related. So this innovation, this ability to control commerce, that the Jews were able to say, these Dutch are clever.
Yeah.
But you also have to understand a lot of the Dutch in there are also have got Jewish blood.
Okay.
Are also Jews who migrated from Germany, France, and influenced the creative spirit within the Netherlands. But when we now look at how they then meet here in South Africa, the VOC. The VOC comes from the Netherlands, or the Dutch East India Company comes from the Netherlands, starts circumventing Africa, coming to the bottom of Africa, and then they settle here at the filling point that's here in South Africa. When they settle here, there's the Khoi that are here, the Dutch, the Portuguese have already been here. So they create a city that was mainly based on trading water, wood, and food. And when they created this thing was controlled by a guy called Ashmau, who was a Khoi.
Ashmau.
Yeah.
Okay.
He actually had a daughter, a son who had to be trained in Java by the Dutch, who took them there, showed them how it is that trade is done with the Europeans so that they can better the port of Cape Town. Then he came back and started running that port.
Do you know if the term company comes from the Dutch? You spoke about accounting.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
But
I might have heard something like that. Like even the conceptualization of what a company is today
yes,
may come from those Dutch East India company things. But anyways.
You will see that even till today, most of your corporations in South Africa, so SAB, which was also basically controlled by the Oppenheimers and
Anglo-American, you're right.
But all of its intellectual property was not held in South Africa. It was held in the Netherlands and in Belgium. So Casolaga, Lion, what's the other one? Black Label.
Black Label. Belgium. Sorry, Mark Rich, I think is from Belgium, but he's Jewish. Belgian Jewish person. Mark Rich from the guy who gave birth to Glencoe.
Yes, Glencoe.
Sorry.
So you'll be surprised that all of SAB's products were registered and trademarked, and their intellectual property held in Belgium and the Netherlands.
That means the money flows there because you have to pay the IP owners.
Exactly. So you call it a South African company. It's not. And that's why right now it's been sold. It's now part and parcel of AB InBev. AB InBev was what? Belgian? If you go and look at the capital behind AB InBev, you're still going to see it tying back to that combine I told you about. You're going to see that the investors in there are BlackRock. You're going to see Fidelity, Vanguard, or State Street.
You know, speaking about IP, I don't know if it's Andrew Tate who was mentioning something about this setup, that it still happens today. Because I mean, Nike sweatshops in China and you're like, the Chinese are making everything, and they might, from China, not go back to America. They distribute to wherever the Nikes need to be sold. But the bulk of the money needs to go to America because that's where the IP is held.
That's why the IP is held. Because a pair of Nikes can be manufactured for $99. But the same pair of Nikes is going to sell for $120, sometimes $200. $9 is what it costs to produce it. To transport it to the United States is another probably $1 each. So where does the rest of this value go to? It's because of the intellectual property. The intellectual property, the marketing costs, the brand. That's where the value is.
Sure.
And all those do not reside in China or the places where the production is taking place. SAB's value was being extracted in South Africa. It made alcoholics of Africans.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the profits are in the Netherlands. And when it suited Anglo-America, they simply sold it off to a European company that has no association with South Africa. So South Africa can't even take claim of SAB. Yet SAB was created by the blood, sweat, and enslavement of South Africans.
Can we shut it down here? Sorry, if you can please wrap it up here, because I think we can keep going and I'm scared.
Agreed.
Please, no, please carry on with the SAP, Ashmao. I don't know if you want to finish off that.
Right. But
then you want to owe me again.
Very good. So with people like...
owe me, Baba. I'm a Rothschild. I'm here to collect my debt.
With people like Ashmao, and before Ashmao, there was another gentleman, I've just forgotten his name. They began to run the port.
Yeah.
And in fact, Ashmao at some point became the governor of the Cape. He was the what they call the port master of the Cape Port. So the Cape Port was not established by white people per se. It was established by the Khoi. It was established by Africans.
Yeah.
But over time, the Dutch came in. They realized this guy's making money.
Yeah.
He sells livestock. He sells water. Water was very important.
Because you can't drink seawater.
Yes, you can't drink seawater.
Yeah.
And the food that they were growing. And these were being grown by the peripheral Khoi and the San communities and the Xhosa communities were the ones that were growing this food that would be brought to port. So the very first thing that Jan van Riebeeck does is once they've created a relationship, within 10 years, they then start chasing away the Khoi from the mouth of the river so that they can start controlling the river and fresh water. They then build a fort around it. And then they needed cows from the natives, from the Khoi, from the San, and from the Xhosa community. They started sending their people out to raid. They tried to buy. Ashmao had already had relationships with all the natives in the area, so he started refusing them to sell the cows to the Dutch. He would do the selling. And when he sold the cows to the Dutch, he would sell and say 5 or 3, 5 sheep, 1 cow, and so forth. So the Dutch never had enough to put on their ships. They would have to then rely, and the English would have to rely on Ashmao. And Ashmao himself had a relationship with the English. The Dutch started seeing this as a problem. The first guy that was there, I'm just forgetting his name, they killed him. The Dutch. Ashmao, they were trying to kill him. Eventually they arrested him and put him onto Robben Island because he killed one of the shepherds of the Dutch and took back the cows that they had stolen. So this is where you start seeing a coalescing of the Dutch, the Dutch coming in and beginning to control South Africa. And as they begin to control South Africa, as it becomes more important as a filling point, the Jews are also coming in with an interest. But I also want us to stop the danger of separating the Jews and the Dutch, because a lot of Dutch were Jewish.
People as well.
Just like a lot of Germans were Jewish people, a lot of Russians are Jewish people, a lot of Americans are Jewish people, a lot of Britons are Jewish people. But the point is, we're dealing with people that are very powerful.
We still have a lot to unpack, but thank you so much for coming through today. The political education,